to some sewing fun. We are going to be making this adorable tote bag here. I think it is the perfect size and it has a nice boxed bottom. It comes with some awesome, helpful handles that fit perfectly. Let me see if I can show you. My biggest thing about tote bags is I want to be able to do this. I don't want my elbow getting stuck. And this tote bag does that, so I'm very excited about that. This tote bag also has some interfacing in it, which keeps it nice and stiff. But because of the interfacing, I do want to mention that I would not recommend this for a newbie sewer. So I know I do beginner sewing tutorials for the most part. I would say that this is a project, if you've sewn about 4 or 5 items, definitely give this one a shot. You will learn some fun skills. We are going to do French seams, ooh la la, in this particular tote bag. If you've never sewn a French seam before, I will link to my tutorial on how to make a pillowcase. We do French seams in that pillowcase. They are super easy to do. But if you've never done them before, it might be easier to do without a project using interfacing. So with all of that said, I hope that you guys will subscribe to this channel. If you are new here, let's make ourselves a fun tote bag.
Start by cutting your lining fabric out at 17 inches by 36.5 inches. Then cut out your outer fabric at 17 inches by 24.5 inches. You will also need 2 straps. You can make yourself straps using fabric, but I am going to use these straps here and I will link to similar products in the description down below. Then you will also need some type of interfacing. For myself, I use this Pellon Craft Fuse 808 interfacing. I will link to a few options as well for interfacing in the description down below. Then we will add our interfacing to both of our pieces of fabric.
First, we need to talk about our interfacing just a little bit. The interfacing itself has a shiny side and has a matte side. What do you think the shiny side is for? It's the glue, and it's the glue that's going to stick to your fabric. So make sure when you're trying to adhere your interfacing to your fabric that the shiny side, the glue side, is facing to the wrong side, the back side of your fabric. Another thing that you need to know is that interfacing can bubble up if it has not been adhered to the fabric really, really well. So we might be in a rush and we just want to get that interfacing on and it looks like it's on. Give it a few more goes to make sure that it's really secure and on there very nice. Of course, follow your interfacing instructions on how to actually put it on there. And one more thing you'll see in the images, I left about 1/4 of an inch around the entire outer edge of my fabric. That's not necessary, but I did it because I did not want to get the glue from the interfacing onto the bottom of my iron, even though my iron is a mess anyways and I need to clean it. I was trying to avoid any extra sticky.
Once you have your interfacing on both pieces of fabric, then grab your handles and you'll need to cut out 2 handles at 34 inches in length. If you're making fabric handles, then cut out 2 pieces of fabric at 4 inches by 34 inches, and then just fold them in half, give them a quick press, and then take both outer edges, fold them into that center crease, fold again, and then sew a seam along that outer edge to create your handle. And now it's time to put our tote bag together. So grab your outer piece of fabric and lay it right sides facing up, and you'll want to lay your handles on both opposite sides. So you'll measure in from the outer edge 4.5 inches on both sides, laying your handles in place. You'll do that for the left handle and for the right handle. This way, both handles will be laying in the same place opposite each other. And I also want to mention that you should have a quick look at your handles to make sure that they are not twisted in any way. And now it's time to lay our lining on top. We will lay it right sides facing down. And as you can see here, I pieced together some interfacing to make it work for me. I of course recommend using a whole piece, but honestly, I am not about to waste my scraps, so I used every little bit that I had. And if you want to do the same, you go right ahead. Anyways, we are going to attach our lining now to both outer edges of our outer fabric. So grab your clips and just clip along both the left and the right side. You'll have to maneuver your fabric a little bit because of course the inner lining is larger than the outer fabric. So you'll end up with a little bit of a bubble of fabric in the center for now, and that's okay. And once you've pinned across both outer edges, then you will sew a 1/4 inch seam across both of those outer edges. And of course, start with a back stitch and end with a back stitch. And this is what it'll look like once you've done that. Now it's time to turn it right sides out. It might take a little bit of wrangling because we have our interfacing attached, so it's a stiffer fabric, which is a very good thing. Then you will lay your fabric out and try to line it up so that you have an even amount of your lining fabric showing on both sides. So I measured 3 inches of green fabric on both sides. I found it easiest to do this using my measuring gauge here, which I will link to in the description down below as well. I use it all the time. It is an amazing and very cheap sewing tool. Highly recommend. Once you get everything evened out, then just push along the edges with your fingers so that you're just putting a nice crease in the interfacing, and then grab some sewing clips and clip along both edges to hold that in place. Then what you'll want to do is fold your fabric in half and just double check that your seams line up on both edges, because you do want those seams to line up once you've sewn everything together. Then what we're going to do is just take it to our iron and press the seam of our outer lining there down. Then what you'll do is you'll take it to your sewing machine and you will sew a seam along that bottom edge. I used my 1/4 inch sewing foot for this, so it's just a 1/4 inch below the actual seam. This will also be the time that you will sew down your handles. So what I did for my handles is I used black thread on top, and then I used a white thread for my bobbin thread, because your bobbin thread will be seen on the lining side of your fabric. So you can see there I did one with my black on my bobbin, and then I switched to white because I just did not like how that looked. So I just sewed a rectangle around the outer edge of all of the straps.
And now it's time to sew this tote bag together. We are going to be making those French seams. When you are sewing your French seams, you may end up sewing over some thicker sections of your fabric. So I highly recommend that you go slow over those sections. You may even want to use the hand crank for a few of those stitches if you're a little nervous. And if you feel like your sewing machine is struggling through some of these thicker seams, I recommend using a jean needle. I used an all-purpose needle and I had no issues, but I just did want to suggest that just in case, because you know, I would hate for this project to become frustrating for you. Then sewing just isn't fun anymore, right? And we want to have fun. Oh, and please, if you could, hit that like button if you are liking this tutorial. It really does help YouTube share my video with other people who might be interested in making a fun tote bag like this.
So now it's time to fold our project in half and line up our edges, and then we will clip along both raw edges, and then we can sew a 1/4 inch seam down both sides, backstitching when you start and when you stop. For some of you, it may feel wrong to fold your bag with the outside of your tote bag facing outwards, but with our French seams, it will all make sense. So trust me, sew those first 2 seams on the outside of the tote bag on those outer edges. Now that those 2 seams are sewn, just take your hands and push away all of those random threads along the edges, and then take a rotary cutter or a pair of scissors and trim away all of those loose threads. We don't want those sticking out of our French seam, so this step just prevents that. Then take your bag and turn it right side out, pushing out those outer corners. Finger press those outer seams nice and flat, and then take it back to your sewing machine and sew another seam along both outer edges. You will do a back stitch when you start and you stop, and this seam needs to be a little bit larger than the 1/4 inch seam that you sewed previously, because we want to make sure that that raw edge is hidden in this French seam. Once you've done that, then you can turn this project right side out once again and push out those corners. So these French seams have nicely tucked in our raw edges. Now it's at this point that you could call the project done, but I really encourage you to add that boxed bottom. It makes this tote bag so much better.
So before we finish our tote bag, I have a question for you. Where are you from in this world? Please leave a comment down below and let me know where you are watching from. I love seeing how vast our sewing community is, so please let me know. And of course, if you have any questions regarding the tote bag itself, leave them in the comments down below. I am there to help you.
So to get those boxed corners, what you'll do is you will fold your bag so that you have triangles at both points. And then you will measure in 1.5 inches, draw a line straight across, and then sew a seam across that line. Now we are going to do French seams for these boxed corners as well. So we're going to do this on the outside of our pouch first, and then we will reverse it and go on the inside of our pouch. Once you've sewn across that marked line, then just trim close to the seam that you just sewed. And then we'll turn our project wrong sides out. Then finger press those 2 boxed edges, take them to your sewing machine and sew another seam across there. You will sew a little more than a 1/4 inch seam across both of those edges, and then you'll be able to turn your project right side out. And as we take a peek inside of our tote bag, you can see how nicely those French seams finish this project.
You have now officially learned how to make French seams, how to do interfacing, how to make an awesome tote bag that is standalone and usable. Come on now. I hope that you guys are going to enjoy your tote bags. And if you are looking to up your sewing skills, I do have a whole playlist where I go from beginner basics all the way through to the end on frustrations with your sewing machine, all of that kind of stuff. I will link to that playlist in the description down below. I hope that you guys are having a wonderful day. Happy sewing, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.